guys, welcome back to Men Cyclops. So today I'm sharing with you a finished 3D print of Scott Summers' X-Men Cyclops kit that I just painted up for a friend of mine. Now, I did do a garage kit review of this a while back, and I forgot who sculpted it. Maybe it's in that video. I completely forgot, but it was a pretty straightforward kit. You could see the boot pieces separate, the legs were separate, the waist was separate, the upper torso was separate, and so was the gloves. So he came in a bunch of different pieces. He was 3D printed. I'm not sure who 3D printed it. We did have a little bit of an issue with the base. I'll go over that in a second, but all in all, it's a really great item. I mean, if you're a fan of the old school X-Men and Cyclops and all that like burn era stuff of X-Men, this kit is like literally looks like he just jumped right out of the comic book. It's really great. It's always fun to paint up some of the classic characters every once in a while. These days, all you see is all the new stuff, Venomized stuff, so all this kind of old classic stuff. It's really fun to work on. It almost feels like a Bowen Designs item, just a little bit larger, so he's a 1/4 scale. So he's actually fairly big. It's almost like he's a little bit taller than 1/4, but not by much. Maybe it's just an illusion with the base being so thick, but pretty straightforward. Comes with a second head. Nice good old classic retro type look to him. And that is pretty much it. I mean, other than that, all I did was paint up the skin tones. Kind of mixed up some nice classic skin tone. For the goggles, I added a little bit of a pearlized metallic in there, but not much, because I didn't want it to like blend in with like the rest of his yellow. I wanted to make it look like it was a little bit like smoother, plasticky type thing, maybe. Kind of like an old school goggles. I painted up his blue outfit, and then after I sent pictures, he kind of wanted a little bit darker. So what I did is I kind of muted the color down a bit. I really added a little bit of browns into it, and I darkened the blue so it's not like a vibrant blue. It's kind of more of a, you know, a little bit more of an older, muted type of classic-y blue, I guess you can say. For the yellows, it's not yellow like out of the bottle. It's actually a mixed up yellow with some raw sienna, and then there's pure raw sienna for all the shadows, and then I kind of mixed them up together just to kind of make it look not lemon yellow, but not like a really dull yellow. I just tried to give it that old school feel. For his belt buckle and belt, I kind of texturized the belt a little bit to make it look like leather. So I just tried to make that stand out a little bit more compared to the rest of the outfit. Other than that, that's pretty much straightforward. I mean, there's not really much more to him. The most of this pretty much was just kind of like cleaning it up because it was a 3D print. So a lot of the back area had like all those like divots from the supports. So I had to really sand that stuff down and go from there. Now, we did have a little bit of an issue with the base. I did kind of talk about this on the stream, and I guess I'm going to talk about it now. What happened is, see, this is kind of the learning curve, and I'm not knocking the 3D printer who printed it. I'm knocking the actual resin, because I'm not experienced enough yet with 3D resins that I know what I can and can't do. You know, all these years working on stuff between polystone, polyurethane, and all these other materials, I know what I can and can't do, and I know what I could get away with. Now with 3D printing, items that are hollow sent to me, it's kind of a whole new learning curve. I need to learn what I can and can't do with these items. So, what happened is, if you saw my kit review on this, the base was actually like up higher. It had like a bigger part at the bottom. So my friend asked me if I could cut down the base. So I cut down the base, and what I did was I pretty much you know, put in Durham's water putty, and then after the water putty I did like a layer, and then I did another layer, and then I did another, because I kept like letting it dry for like a couple days. And then at the very bottom, what I did is I put A's around here, and I evened it out, I leveled it, and I sanded it, and then I put Bondo at the bottom. And then what happened was, I had a little bit of a family emergency, so I was gone for pretty much 2 or 3 weeks. So when I came back to the house and on the studio, I looked at the base I was working on, because I was ready to get back on him and finish him up, and all of a sudden it warped up. And I was like, what the hell is going on? So, if you work with polyurethane, which is like most of the resin kits and people use from like Smooth On, and it's a lot of the stuff I use, that does not absorb moisture. And also, polystone, you know, like all your sideshow statues and Bowen designs, that polystone is pretty much polyurethane with stone powder, and that doesn't absorb moisture. So I know if this item was casted and printed up in that resin, I could put that Durham's putty in here, and this would never absorb any of that moisture. Your moisture would evaporate on the bottom over time, but what would happen is, whatever 3D resin this is, because this isn't actually frozen 4K, I know from the frozen 4K I can actually pour resin into that, what I did with my Power Girl 3D print of a couple videos ago. Somehow, this 3D resin absorbed the moisture. So when I came home, this was actually down further, and it was all mushy. Like literally, whatever moisture was in this Durham's putty, this absorbed it, and it absorbed it all around. Now, it's very hard to see on the item on the side, but it actually absorbed it here, and it actually warped out the edges, and that's why this split. So I was shocked. I didn't know that this resin would absorb that kind of moisture. And then what happened is after this all started drying and this dried, it cracked up here, and it also broke over here. So it's not the 3D printer who printed its fault. It's the resin itself. This resin, whatever resin this is, I now know that if I get this again, what's going to happen is I know that I cannot do this type of filler with this. The Durham's putty is a no-go. I also did learn that now that this did this, what I did is I hit it with a blow dryer, and literally going on a blow dryer with this, it really started mushing and melting really, really fast. So it takes polyurethane a little bit more heat to kind of bend, but this mushed up really fast. Actually, just putting this in front of the heater itself, like just a regular heater on my floor to warm up my studio, what happened was like this started getting mushy. So lesson learned is, for now on, if people ever ask me to do like a 3D print, I got to find out what kind of resin they're using, what I can and can't do with it. If it's frozen, I know I could probably fill it up. If it's not frozen resin, then I know I can't kind of do this. I would just have to leave it hollow. So he contacted the 3D printer who printed it up, and they went and they printed another base for me. Now, when I got this base in the mail, it actually was a little tacky when I pulled it out from the box. Now, I don't know if it was the moisture from the bubble wrap that was around it being shipped in like the cold weather, or if maybe it wasn't cured enough. I don't know. So I'm actually a little bit scared of this base right now, because I did prime it up and I didn't get any of that tackiness anymore. It went away. But after I printed up the primer on the X and then I printed up the red X, it stayed tacky a bit, and it got me a little bit weary. So I kind of misted it with some Vallejo satin varnish just to kind of get that tackiness away. So the tackiness is gone, but I don't know if this paint is going to peel down the line, because I don't know if this base is actually cured enough. So I do know that 3D, you know, printed stuff, it cures with UV dye. I mean, not UV light. So what I did is, when I did get this base in the mail and it was a little bit like tacky, what I did do is I had it in the sunlight from the window, because I get at a certain time of the day I get direct sunlight. So what I did is I left it in the window for like 10 minutes, and then what I did is I turned it around for another 10 minutes, and then I flipped it upside down for 10 minutes. So I hope that helped cure it a little bit more. I'm just hoping that this resin is UV cured resin and not like heated. I don't know. It's just that I had a lot of problems with these bases. It just became a nightmare. So if this base does go bad, the one I painted up, we do know that he can actually still print up another one, and we can always paint it and swap them in and out. So it's not the end of the world if this base goes bad, and it's just a basic black X. And one other thing too is, like I said, I know this video is kind of harping into resin, but I'm kind of explaining what I went through it. Like, painting him up and putting him together was very simple. It was the base that caused all the problems. So one of the other things I noticed with this resin is when I was sanding it down, now I was using fine sandpaper, and I would hit it with my Duplicolor filler primer, and I would fill in like scratches. But what happened is, it seems that the sandpaper was like peeling the resin as it sands, instead of like sanding it down and cutting it. It seems like it was peeling it like it was plastic and not really resin. It's kind of hard to explain. Like think of it like, have you guys ever like sanded like paint? Like if you painted on a car, if you painted on a house or something, and you go to sand it and it starts peeling. That's kind of like what the resin was doing. It was kind of weird. So I had to do what I had to do is I had to prime it. I had to let it sit. I had to prime it again, let it sit, and then prime it again, and then fine sand and buffed it so no resin would show as I was sanding it down. And then I primed it again. So I don't know. It's the 3D resin stuff is kind of a whole new learning curve, and it's kind of like where I'm at with this stuff now. So that's kind of a little bit of a, you know, what went on with this kit. You think that you would have a simple paint up, put it together, glue it, and you're done. But I kind of ran into all these issues. But the main body was fine. Like I said, I think the only thing I had a problem with was all the little supports on the back, his back, because there was a lot of supports on his back. A lot. So back there was all these supports and divots, and I had to sand those down, and then I had to prime it up again, and I had to sand it down. Yeah, there's a lot of divots, but that's kind of like the norm now for when you do 3D printing, especially like, you know, people who have them in their houses. So you have to kind of start planning where you're going to put your supports and to hide them. I think that's something that people are going to have to kind of work on a little bit more as you get used to, you know, printing these items out. But that's kind of the downfall so far. So, like, you know, if this item was all textured in his front and he was texturing in his back, to sand all those supports down, we would lose all that texture. So that's kind of like, you know, like if he had all this texture on his back, I would have lost all that texture because there were so many supports, and it's very, very hard to sand a little tiny support and keep a texture. So that's kind of where I went with this kit. I don't know, hopefully you guys are kind of like, you know, you can notice that something simple kind of turned into sort of a nightmare. But this base is going to be thrown in the garbage, so I'm not even ever going to mess with it again because I don't like this resin. For now on, I even told my friend, I said, you know, the printer that printed this for you, tell them to buy frozen 4K or frozen 8K. So far, I know that frozen stuff is worth every dime. I have a funny feeling with 3D resin, you can't cheap out on it. You're going to have to stick to high quality resin, because I think if you cheap out on your resin, you're going to run into issues. Because another thing I'm worried about is I did put a rod in the leg, and I put in like freeform air. But my fear is that if this resin is as crappy as it is, if this thing ever sort of gets like hot, it might warp at the ankles and flop over. That's how soft I feel that this resin could be in the heat and sun. So yeah, so far, guys, from my experience, frozen 4K is probably the best resin so far that I've seen, and I haven't really seen that much 3D print yet, you know. But so far, I like that resin. And I'm talking about 3D print of stuff in your house. You know, people who could buy a 3D printer and have it in their house. I think that stuff is 4K frozen is the way to go. If you're going to cheap out and you're going to try to save like $5-10, don't do it. Get yourself better quality resin. But all in all, the kit is great. So I told my friend, I said, look, man, tell your printer to start getting 4K, you know, the 4K frozen, or find another printer, because I hate for you to start wasting money where you put out all this money for original sculpts, and then all of a sudden down the line, paint's peeling, he's warping, he's bending, the base is peeling, you know, it's just not worth that headache to have to go back and fix it all. So, you know, and me, I know at least with the 4K frozen, if it was printed in a nice good thickness, like at least 1/4 of an inch thickness, I know you could go in there with some smooth on, you know, a resin, and you can make it a nice solid piece, and you won't ever have to worry about any bending and any of that stuff, sort of what I did with my Power Girl. So that's pretty much it. Sorry about the little bit of, like I said, I don't want to really be bitching about the resin, but I'm just kind of explaining to you what I went on. Some people did mention to me in my live stream when we talked about it, about maybe they just didn't print it thick enough, but I think it's still semi-thick, but I think it's just the resin itself. It just absorbed moisture and it went to hell. But all in all, great sculpt, great kit, just cheap resin. That's pretty much it. So I told my friend, I said, hopefully down the line, you know, you don't have any issues, but if you do, we can kind of correct it best we can. And he's going to try to look into getting better quality resin for his stuff from now on. So with that being said, let me know what you guys think. If you do have any recommendations, or you do know any more about 3D prints and resins, leave them in the comments, because like I said, I'm doing a learning curve, and I want to know what type of resins out there, what I can and can't do, and stuff that would be stable for putting in polyurethane resin pores to make it thicker, or even freeform air or other stuff, because I'm a little bit worried about this one down the line. So with that being said, thanks for watching. Let me know what you guys think, and we'll be back with some more videos.